Good evening again, everybody, and welcome to our first council meeting of 2021. I would take a mover and a seconder to open the meeting. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Lagasse, that this meeting be opened at 7 p.m. All in favor? Carried. We had a meeting, two meetings on December 8th, a special meeting for, yes. I have a motion first. I take a mover and a seconder to appoint Andre Gagne as the recording clerk for our meeting. A mover for that, Councillor Beaudoin, seconded by Councillor Vaillancourt, that Andre Gagne be appointed as the recording clerk for the purpose of this meeting. All in favor? Carried. I have a motion that reads the minutes of the special meeting of council held December 8th, 2020 and regular meeting held December 8th, 2020 be adopted as circulated. I take a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Vaillancourt, seconded by Councillor Lagasse. All in favor? Carried. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest in the general nature thereof? Hearing none. There's no presentations or delegations for this meeting. Minutes and reports of municipal committees and boards. I believe the only committee that's had a meeting out of the group is emergency management and planning. But planning, we do have minutes in our package and recommendations from them. Is there a report from planning?
No, just that we have two recommendations that will be coming. One that will be we're going to ask to defer a consent application until a site inspection is done by North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority, and then the second one is for B8 2020, and that's on your on the report.
Okay. Fire department, don't believe there's any information from there. Recreation and fitness. The library is doing curbside yet, I believe. And police services has not had a meeting. I'll have to see what our status is as far as holding a virtual meeting in that regard soon. Many of you, or if not all of you, know that one of the members of our police service board, Neri Paquette, had significant heart surgery prior to Christmas, but is recuperating well now. And emergency management meets weekly, and there was news at the provincial level today of further tightening of measures to try and stop the COVID-19 numbers that they're experiencing. And the latest that I heard was that under their modeling, if change doesn't happen and the trend continues at the pace that it is, by the end of February, they could be approaching 20,000 cases per day, which is certainly something that nobody, even myself, could have imagined in the first wave in the springtime. So hope these new measures that they put in place start to reduce those rates of infection. Public Works, is there any comment from the Public Works manager this evening related to the department?
The winter has been treating us quite lovely. We're well on top of everything and look forward to working with council in the new year.
Okay, thank you. So motions of committees, there's only the planning advisory motions, I believe. I trust that everybody has these motions in your package, so you're not being surprised by what I read, or do you not? Were the motions copied to everybody? Okay, good. I see that from the recording secretary. So I take a mover and a seconder for application B7 2020 before I read it then, and that's the deferral. Moved by Councillor Lagacé, seconded by Councillor Vaillancourt. Whereas the Planning Advisory Committee has recommended to Council to defer consent application B7 2020 Ron DeVost, pending a site inspection and comments by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority in the spring. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of this recommendation. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. The second one is consent application B8 2020 Christine Woods. I'd take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Lagacé. Whereas the Planning Advisory Committee has recommended to Council that consent application B8 2020 Christine Woods be approved, be it resolved that Council approves of this recommendation along with the conditions and notes set out on the attached Decision of Approval Authority form. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Carried. Reports and non-municipal committees and boards. Phenom, there was a emailed newsletter came this afternoon in my inbox. Conservation Authority, is there a report from there?
Yes, there is a report. We didn't have a meeting last month, but we are having our general meeting in a couple of weeks. It hasn't been, the date hasn't been released yet, but it'll be coming. And I just wanted you to know that Bill 229, under including Schedule C, they decided because there was so many negative responses towards their recommendation, their report, that they decided they were going to have a working group. And Brian Taylor has been chosen as one to represent the Conservation Authority, and he'll be working on the regulations and policies on that. And that's all I have to report on conservation.
Okay, thank you. Castleholm, further in our agenda tonight, there's correspondence and basically a motion of support from the municipality of East Ferris. And I attended a virtual meeting prior to Christmas related to that financing subject, that both the tentative motion in our package and the East Ferris motion in our package and letter from them speak to, and I'll hold comment on the subject until we get to it in that point of the agenda. There's no notice of motions for this meeting. So moving then to bylaws, 8.1, a first, second, and third reading of bylaw 2021-2, that being a bylaw for the purpose of amending bylaw 2020-49, the special zone number 50, Roger Kehoe. Oh, I think I've skipped over some public works motions here that they're coming later in our agenda though, I see. Okay. Bear with me a moment here. So then, and 2012-49 is the zoning bylaw, and the bylaw that we're considering here right now is special zone number 50. That's the Roger Kehoe, Erica Buck one we discussed in our earlier meeting of this evening. I would take a mover and a seconder before I read the motion of that one, please. Moved by Councillor Lagasse. Seconded by Councillor Viancore. Whereas council deems it necessary and expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw for the purpose of amending bylaw 2012-49, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the character, location, and use of buildings and structures in the Township of Bonfield under the authority of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13, Schedule A, to bylaw 2012-49, is amended by changing the zone symbol on the lands designated zone change from rural RU to special zone number 50, SZ50, on the attached schedule to special zone number 50, be read a first, second, and third time, passed in number 2021-2, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Carried. Eight point two. First, second, and third reading of bylaw 2021-3, and that's related to special zone number 51, Chris Fuller. I would take a mover and a seconder for that one prior to reading the motion. Moved by Councillor Foisey, seconded by Councillor Lagasse. Whereas council deems it necessary and expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw for the purpose of amending bylaw 2012-49, being a bylaw to regulate the use of land and the character, location, and use of buildings and structures in the Township of Bonfield, under the authority of Section 34 of the Planning Act, RSO 1990, Chapter P13, Schedule A, to bylaw 2012-49, is amended by changing the zone symbol on the lands designated zone change from commercial, highway, and service C2 to special zone number 51, SZ51, on the attached schedule to special zone number 51. Be read a first, second, and third time, passed in number 2021-2, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions on this one? All in favor? Carried. Item 8.3 is a first and second reading related to our procedural bylaw for the Township of Bonfield, its committees and boards. I would take a mover and a seconder for that prior to reading the motion. Moved by Councillor Viancore, seconded by Councillor Foisey. That bylaw 2021-4 be read a first and second time and be referred to the committee of the whole council. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. Disbursements. I take a mover and a seconder for to table the disbursements, and then we can ask any questions and I'll read the motion after. Moved by Councillor Viancore, seconded by Councillor Baudouin. Any questions on the disbursements this evening? Yes, Councillor Legacy.
On page 2 of 6, at the bottom, protection and to persons and property, we have a side-by-side?
Yes, we have had one for a couple of years.
All right, so we needed new tracks for it. And then I have a couple of questions on page 4 of 6 regarding Public Works. The roadside brushing. I see an amount here, and was it, I believe there were different companies that did the roadside brushing. How was it compared to, like, were they as good as, better than last year, and how was their price range?
It's actually the same company that did the brushing for us. There are only one other company that just came into the woodwork that does roadside brushing now. So we'll be able to have some comparative quotes next year. I think that the job was excellent. Although it is a fortunate road, Pine Lake, because there's not a lot of housing that's right against Pine Lake Road. So it was easily avoided that we accidentally took anyone's lilac bushes out or anything to that effect. And we were very on top of the any brushing that would be remaining on the road. And it also helped that we did get that little bit of snow, so we were able to also plow off anything that may have been left on the roadside. And I think it looks terrific, and it'll really help dry that up this spring.
Good, thank you. And that was within our budget?
That was outside of our normal brushing budget. Because of COVID, we had some remaining monies in the budget that we were unable to use. So we felt that it was okay to utilize the different accounts to finish up our budget and to go further with the brushing that we were able to do with the pandemic being affecting us.
All right, I just have, I believe, one more question, and that's regarding the backhoe window.
The holes in the backhoe window that are on the track system that holds all the, so when you pull the levers in, they had to get all filed out because that area was becoming all rounded and the pin wasn't sitting properly inside the track, which allowed the window to come down.
Okay, all right. And I do have another question regarding the grader rental. Are graders still down?
Yeah, so we would require a public works meeting or the opportunity to be able to discuss that. We'll see what we can do about a committee meeting with our public works committee, or if we shall bring it to council. We'll have a discussion with the CAO and the mayor regards to such, and perhaps we can have that discussion quite soon.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
You're welcome.
Councillor Baudouin first, and then I think Councillor Foisey had a question. Okay.
The Riviera insurance, is that our annual insurance on the first page? Is that our annual fee?
I believe so, yes. 115,000 or something like that.
Yeah, 113 some.
Yeah.
Okay. And
That is the annual,
pardon?
it is the annual charges. It is the annual charges.
Okay, thank you. I have the Frank Cowan company legal fees, page 2, 552. That's one of them, and then the other one I know what it is.
The legal fees on page 2, I believe, are because they hired a special adjuster for that case.
That's correct.
And they bill us by the hour for the work that special adjuster does.
Okay. And the VS Group, there's 4 of them.
Yeah, that's covering all of 2020 for the work that they've done for us.
Okay, what is VS Group?
The consulting firm in North Bay, Vince Schenk is the principal owner of it. And they're doing a lot of the work that used to be done by Jim Budeye, internal statements and review of the cemetery reports, the Ministry of Health quarterly reports. They helped us with the review of the tax bylaw and the levy. So it's routine monthly financial issues that they're doing for us.
Okay, did we hire these people?
Pardon?
Did we hire these people? Did we hire this
Well,
accountant?
we engage them, yes.
Do we have paperwork, contract? I don't believe I've seen that contract with these people.
I think the mayor has addressed this previously, and perhaps I could ask him to speak to it, but we have money in our budget for consultants, and we don't normally have to bring that to council. I alerted you to the fact that we were going to engage them some time ago because given the pandemic and the departure of Mr. Budeye, which was rather sudden and abrupt, we needed to pick up that function. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity to do an outsourcing, which we would do in the before times. And we're using that company on a trial basis at the moment. We haven't signed any formal contract. We're assessing the work that they do for us for the next month or two.
So there is no contract with these people yet?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Foisey, you had a question?
Yeah, on page 1, the COVID kits, are those prepaid cards or have they been handed out already? Or
The COVID kits, Andre, I think is sitting across the table from probably about 120 of them or so, but which is to our disappointment a little bit in that we were hoping for a bigger rollout than we have. But in answer to the first part of your question, yes, they're prepaid cards in that there's a gift certificate in there from the Dinner Bell for either pre-prepared meals or if I guess it could be used at any point in time if they are ever able to have in-person dining again due to COVID. And there's a second card in there that is from the President's Choice Loblaw group of companies, which is No Frills and Independent and all of those. There was quite a bit of discussion held leading up in the days before the kits were actually built. We tried to buy a generic Canada Post type gift card that could be used anywhere, which was our goal. Unfortunately, the local post office didn't have them in quantity enough on short notice that we could do that. And we were recalling the fact that the Visa gift cards that we had at Christmas time a year ago for the distribution, many of them didn't work. And the last thing we wanted was to give out something to somebody and have failure of it to be usable. So the urgency, the grant came in, I think it was in May for this project. I'll take blame for the fact that the rollout wasn't as prompt as it should have been. Fortunately, or unfortunately, I guess it is, the second wave is more substantial than the first wave ever was of COVID. So they're certainly very relevant yet in that they contain gloves, hand sanitizer, and these certificates that can be used for primarily foodstuffs or whatever's needed in the household that receives one. The urgency in finally getting this launched was that we had the idea that the Lions baskets that were going out under their telethon mechanism, we would distribute to the Lions directly however many COVID kits to match the number of baskets they had going out, so they could include it in that, which we knew would certainly arrive at people in need of these kits. And secondly, the rest of them, another 20, I believe, Andre, went to the food bank for they have a list of regular patrons. So we thought we covered probably I believe the Lions baskets was in and around the 35 range that they distributed locally this year. So there was about 50 to 60 COVID kits that went out in that time frame for Christmas, pre-Christmas launch. As I suggested a few moments ago, there's a number of them, over half we still have in our possession. There's been some distributed to persons that we've recognized could use one. I've delivered personally a pair of them, just drop off kind of thing anonymously. And there's over half yet still in our possession for distribution under whatever mechanism we can find to get those out there. And the latest suggestion we had in discussion at the ECG meeting was that our physician in the medical center is operating primarily on house call basis. His preference is, first of all, to do telemedicine because it's the safest for him, the patient, and it seems to be working extremely well with the electronic medical records that we have. Failing that, he does a house call, and we made the decision to provide him with a number of these kits so that when he does a house call, he's obviously very aware and can assess person in need at that point in time, and he could leave one of these kits with them. So that's another way that we're trying to distribute them. But yes, in the kits themselves, everything that's in there is prepaid and the money has been expended. And I believe the report has been filed to the grantor of the money because they were starting to question what we did with it. There was a timeline of reporting how we dispersed the money, and that report has been filed, and apparently they're satisfied with it.
Right.
Yes, Councillor Baudouin.
So who decided where, I know you just ran off a few things. Who decided where it was supposed to be a senior kit decided by council. I don't think council had anything to do with it. Not most of council anyways. So who decided where these cards are going?
Well, as I just described, it hasn't been decided yet. There's well over half of them still in our possession. But the parameters of the grant was that they go to, well, on the basis of our application, when we applied, we said we could provide them to seniors and persons in need, I think is how we described it. Now, person in need can be anyone of any age. So that left us open to, being able to use them wherever required. We approached the Lions Club and the Golden Age Club to share with us their membership lists. There is some reservation in doing so because of, as we know now, there's so many privacy laws related to sharing your membership lists and other such things. So that didn't seem like a good way of doing that. And we left it as an open question all summer of how we would distribute these. If my hesitation when it was discussed was that if we blanket suggested that the township, has we didn't know how many kits we were going to build in the first place because we had $8,000 to work with. So if you're going to make it of any substance at all, you had to keep it probably within that 200 range of kits being built. Therein, we didn't know at the point in time that we first had the money what we should put in it as far as sanitizer, gloves, those types of things. As it turned out, and the shortage of those type of products wasn't as acute the later we got into the year. But Anne, through Sling Choker in North Bay, obtained supplies for that side of the equation quite efficiently, which left more dollars for the gift card side of the thing. And as it developed, I think we were trying to overthink it a little bit, in that we were trying to think of what we could put in it that would be practical and useful. In the end, it came that it's better that the recipient make their own mind up about what they need from their COVID kit, and that's where the gift card component of it came to be the choice.
Yeah, my only comment is next time, maybe wider, more of a variety of choices, like the people in Bonfield to go out to the Dinner Bell or the or Gagny's Esso. That's pretty far to go. If they're in need, they want like to go out there and spend the money, the gas and all that to go to spend it there. Well, next time we'll be more inclusive of all the, I guess you base this on the stores that had food, or is that the basis of all those gift cards? Or
I think what it turned out to be on the gift card side of it was availability more than, because I don't believe there's anything in them from Gagny's either, as it turned out, because they just didn't have the quantity of response time to supply us with a number of them to launch the kits with the Lions. We're under the distribution deadline of the Lions baskets going out. And if we'd have made a gift card decision a month earlier, we probably would have had a more generic use it anywhere type of card in there, as opposed to the Loblaw chain of thing that it turned out to be, who were the only supplier. I believe, Andre, maybe I believe you acquired them. You could speak to that.
Did approach Gagny's, and what they have are actually Esso gift cards. So we purchased in a $25 gift card from the Esso. They're actually Gagny's, but they can be used at any Esso gas station or at Gagny's for groceries or gas, whichever you would need. And the other half of the COVID kits received a $25 gift certificate from the Dinner Bell, because she does make available pre-packaged or pre-made meals, which we thought was a good idea for seniors who can't cook for themselves or go to North Bay and pick up groceries. Then they had the option of prepared meals that they could freeze and have for a couple of days in advance or whatever. And
Okay, I wasn't aware that the Gagny's had supplied some of the cards, but they did. Okay. Any other questions on disbursements at all? Yep, Councillor Reinfort.
Yeah, just well, they've already touched on them, but the grader, I mean, that is, I don't know how long we've been paying that monthly fee, but it seems like a lot for, I know we need it, but hopefully we can get a meeting together soon and then see what we can do about moving forward with a possibility of maybe getting a new grader. I know they're expensive, but, and the other one was the municipal insurance. It seems to be quite a hefty raise from their normal. I think, what was it before? Like around 90-something thousand per year.
It was about 98 plus tax, Councillor, and you're right. But two reasons for that increase. One is, and I had extensive discussions with Rive and looked into the market. The reason for that increase is twofold. The market itself. I asked Rive, they're the broker, so they're not tied in with any particular insurance company. I asked them to look at some other companies, and the prices with other companies were even higher than that, because
Wow.
the market has considerably tightened up in terms of who they want to take on as clients. The other reason is our liability experience in the past 2 or 3 years. That's every year that's been reflected in an increase in our premium. But by and large, as that increase that we did experience with Frank Cowan is somewhat less than we looked at out there in the market. And
Right.
in fact, we didn't even have much of a choice. Sam Elliott with Rive contacted a number of other companies on my request, and they weren't interested in new business, period.
Wow. All right, thanks.
Just one moment before we leave that, and I see the request there. On the grader thing, I believe I asked the manager probably in June for a engine rebuild quotation, and that's something we can discuss as far as repairing our own grader, because if you look at the $5,000 a month for Jade equipment, it costs our own grader, being the problem child that it's been. Many months it was costing us $10,000 or $15,000 to keep it
Just to
out
run it.
and working. So I think we're saving money by renting the grader right now, unfortunately, even though it's quite expensive at $1,250 a week. I know, to have a grader on the road, but it would seem this rental has been a lot more resilient than our case had been for some time. But yes, we can't rent a grader forever. And the other part, before I forget too, going way back to the first question, the side-by-side, Councillor Lagasse, is a fire department side-by-side that I guess they've bought tracks for to be able to reach other, off-road areas by the looks of it.
And
So
we bought that
the
2
next
years
question,
ago.
pardon?
We bought that, Mr. Mayor, 2 years ago.
The side-by-side, yes, the tracks are a
Yep,
new addition.
that's
by
right,
the looks
that's
of it,
right.
yeah. Okay, and Councillor Baudouin, a question on the disbursements.
I was just going to touch on the insurance. I know, Peter, you said that you asked them to look at different areas, different people, and it was even higher. Have
Yeah.
we considered looking? I don't have any, I'm not being, I'm not saying anything against Rive. I'm just saying, have we looked at other insurance companies outside of Rive? I'm just saying that because every few years, if I look into a different insurance company for either my business, my home, my car, or whatever, it's always good to shop around and not stay with the same company all the time if somebody can offer you, a better price. So when you look into, say, Rive, and they have different avenues, that's good. There's also other companies out there that also have different companies that look for the same. I just thought I'd bring that up and see if we can, look outside of Rive sometimes, just to
Well,
see. Make sure that
I understand what you're saying, but here's the thing. First of all, there's a distinction between the broker and the carrier. Brokers have the ability to find other insurance carriers, a great deal of them. So Rive Insurance is not tied to Frank Cowan. In fact, truth be known here, in fact, I asked her to find another company where whoever was out there other than Frank Cowan. And they were able to do that. And Sam was able to contact a number of other carriers and ask. And as I said to Councillor Vaillancourt, the market is so tight right now that a lot of insurance companies are waiting the pandemic out. The conditions in the market are such that they're not interested in taking on new business, and the prices are up. We had an insurance broker in North Bay when I first came here for a number of years, was Knox. And the service we had from them, quite frankly, was not good at all. And so 3 years ago, we tendered out the brokerage and asked for some quotes from brokers. And Heck Levine and Rive came in with the best quote. And since then, aside from the carrier that they provide, the service that we get from Rive is very, very good. So it's not just about buying a carrier. It's about service. When we have claims, when we have issues, when we have concerns, we have to get certificates of liability for various grants that we get and so on. Rive Insurance through Heck Levine and now through Sam Elliott are first rate. When we have claims, the adjusting firm that they use is SAS. Steve Hawes is their principal adjuster, and that's all part of the package. So we lost the mayor. We did have another broker. There's not a lot out there in North Bay, and as I said, the largest other one, other than Rive, was Knox, and we didn't have good experience with them at all. So you're right. But as I said, it's not that Rive is limited in terms of finding another carrier out there. She did look, because I asked her to. Just that the market right now, the rates are high, and a lot of insurance carriers right now are not interested in new business until we get through this current year.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Manager Carr.
Also, I'd like to add that Frank Cowan is one of the leaders in the insurance industry for municipal government. Also, anytime we participate with OGRA experiences, they often give us seminars on how to mitigate risk, etc. And I've been to several free seminars with my peers and how we can maintain our liabilities and how to mitigate those things. So it's been very beneficial to have Frank Cowan on our team. I just wanted to add that for the pot.
Yes, CAO Johnson.
Well, I hasten to add, you're right, Anne. However, the reason I made the comment about I'd asked Rive to try and find another carrier than Frank Cowan. Look, I've been in this business for almost 45 years. And when I was CAO in Gravenhurst decades ago, I dealt with Frank Cowan. The Frank Cowan company right now is not the Frank Cowan company that you're talking about, Anne. Frank Cowan company was bought by Intac Insurance, and I do not like them at all. The experience that I had with them, and they own Frank Cowan now. The experience I've had with Intac Insurance is not good at all. The old Frank Cowan is no longer here. You're right about the Frank Cowan. For 30 years, I dealt with Frank Cowan. When I was with the ministry, when I was in Gravenhurst, Frank Cowan was the leader in municipal insurance. There was nobody came close to Frank Cowan. Not anymore. They're gone.
Just a note on the cost of insurance. I tell this to citizens quite often when we talk about the township. And in my farm operation and personal vehicles and everything else, all combined, I probably pay close to $8,000 a year in insurances. And when you look at the fact that a municipality with all the inherent risks of a road system and the recreation facilities and all the business that we do 24/7, 365, being able to insure that and the probably 150 or 200 times the value of assets that, or more, 1,000 times the value of assets that the municipality owns and insures compared to me personally. The $100,000 a year seems quite reasonable in that regard. It's still a substantial bill, however, when it's received. But considering the liability with beaches and parks and skating rinks and road systems and snow plows out plowing in blizzards and everything else, 100,000 a year is still fairly reasonable. And I guess that's the fact that municipalities across the province and across the country have done such a good job of limiting the exposure to claims. But we're drifting away from our disbursement conversation. Is there any other questions related to the disbursements directly? Okay, I have a motion moved by Councillor Vaillancourt, seconded by Councillor Beaudoin, that the following disbursements be approved as prepared. APO 5583, comprising all departments, for a subtotal of $417,283.65, and payroll batches 1088 through 1090 amounting to $60,300.97, resulting in a total disbursement of $477,584.62. Last call for questions related to the disbursements. Yes, our recording clerk has a question.
Payroll batch, there is a typo. It should be 11/18 to 11/22.
Oh, okay. I think that's more an administrative concern than for council, but thank you for that. All right. All in favor? Carried. Moving then to correspondence and information. A memo from the Public Works Manager related to Blue Box transition to producer responsibility in recycling. This has been a matter that every conference, when there used to be conferences, had as one of their keynote conversations to warn municipalities that this was heading our way, because it's a substantial change in who pays for recycling now over companies producing stuff that needed to be recycled and washing their hands of how that got done. Is there any comment you'd like to make, Anne, with respect to the motion before us this evening?
We've had several discussions as a council. We've had a few discussions as committee last year. And the year before that, as the mayor had said, that this has been on the topic of discussion for several years. Now everything is in line. We're just waiting for royal descent on the transition as to how this will roll out. It was a large job as to who was going to pay for what and how they were going to be billed and how they would collect the monies. In our previous discussions, we had resolved that we would stay in. So that means we will still maintain our services and be able to maintain the level of service that we do give with our recycling. And the recycling companies will pay us to maintain those services instead of us contracting out those services and perhaps losing our ability to have a good level of service for our community. So we chose to do that. And this is just a motion to set our date as to when we would like to have that transition happen. Everybody had to be very cognitive of their negotiations with who we already have contracted with us. Miller Waste has been a hot topic and full of discussion with all of our surrounding communities so that we can renegotiate that contract on a smaller basis so that we can transition more easily. This is just to kind of dog ear the date we would like to have. It's not set in stone that we will get this date.
Okay, so if you could just reiterate that. The new contract, if and when we enter one with the recycler, and that being Miller Waste, the checks will now be coming to us as opposed to us paying them to haul our recyclables away, or is that?
Yes.
That
So
can't
right
be
now
right.
we currently pay Miller to remove our recycling, and the government is going to create a pot of monies which will reimburse us for those costs. So yes, we still pay Miller, but we still control the service that's delivered, as opposed to allowing the province to hire Miller to control the service for us. So we will be paid to still have the same service, and we'll still pay Miller, but the province will delegate the monies that we have and how much we recycle.
I see. So the only variable then is we need to know the factor that we'll be receiving from the province prior to entering the negotiation with Miller so that we know how much money we have to work with. Is that how it works?
Yeah, so right now, like all of our recycling is tracked by tonnage, and the Waste Diversion Ontario currently gives us a donation, I guess you would say, to maintain those recycling costs. However, now that they're going to make the producer responsible, the province will collect all the monies and then they'll divvy it out to our municipalities based on that tonnage. So we'll still basically be in the same boat that we are now. We're just maintaining the service ourselves instead of allowing Miller to do it without any transition of dollars.
Okay. And there is a motion related to that I'm just trying to locate. I would take a mover and a seconder for the motion prior to reading it. Moved by Councillor Baudouin, seconded by Councillor Viancore. Whereas the amount of single-use plastics leaking into our lakes, rivers, waterways is a growing area of public concern, and whereas the transition to full producer responsibility for packaging, paper, and paper products is critical to waste, improving recycling, is critical to reducing waste, improving recycling, and driving better economic and environmental outcomes. And whereas the move to a circular economy is a global movement, and that the transition of blue box programs would go a long way towards this outcome. Whereas the Township of Bonfield is supportive of a timely, seamless, and successful transition of blue box programs to full financial and operational responsibility by producers of packaging, paper, and paper products. And whereas the Township of Bonfield is concerned about a recent proposal by the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks that could jeopardize over 135 small, rural, remote, and northern community blue box programs across the province, as well as servicing to schools and public spaces. And whereas the Association of Municipalities of Ontario has requested municipal governments with blue box programs to provide an indication of the best date to transition our blue box program to full producer responsibility. Therefore, be it resolved that the Township of Bonfield strongly advocates for language to be included in the regulation that ensures municipalities under 5,000 continue to receive blue box servicing as was agreed as part of the provincial government's blue box mediation, as well as schools and public spaces. And that the Township of Bonfield would like to transition their blue box program to full producer responsibility on March 1st, 2023. And that this decision is based on a new negotiation for contracted services, as our current contract with Miller Waste Systems will end in February 2021. And that this date for transition may be dependent on negotiating a new contract agreement through process of tender. And that Miller Waste consider negotiating a contract with a shorter term. And that the Township of Bonfield would be interested in providing collection services to producers should we be able to arrive at mutually agreeable commercial terms. And further, that the resolution be forwarded to the Association of Municipalities of Ontario and the Ontario Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Parks. You will note that in that third last paragraph, it spoke to mandating Miller Waste to negotiate with it, and I've so amended it to say consider negotiating as opposed to that they will negotiate, because it's not our place to order them to negotiate. So I believe that will find favor. Any questions on this motion at all? All in favor? Carried. Item 2, a formal request for support from the Bonfield Seniors Housing Complex. I don't believe there is a motion in our package for that for tonight. Okay, so there's no motion in there, Andre, I don't believe, for that one, is there? No, okay. There is correspondence, however, from them, and it speaks to the fact that they have acquired property and made some governance changes, although they haven't shared with us what those governance changes are. It says they've restructured their corporate governance. They've partnered with a new contractor, and they remind us of our commitment to in-kind contribution. The part that's a bit concerning is now they're back seeking us to guarantee the mortgage. And that we were assured when we gave the initial in-kind contribution was not a requirement at that point in time. So I don't know what has changed in that regard. It says they've obtained the financing, but it always boils down to security, and they're requiring, as it says in paragraph 1, I believe it is, that paragraph 2, the nonprofit will require the township to financially support the project by providing a limited guarantee to the financial institution to secure a suitable long-term mortgage. So I'm certain that our we have a similar one coming forward related to the Castle Home thing. Not to compare the two in scope, but part of the Castle Home conversation is the fact that these mortgage guarantees show in your FIR as a liability going forward, and they impair the municipality's ability to borrow. It's basically is whether you've borrowed the money or not. If you're a co-signer to anything, it shows on your books until it's discharged. So that is a concern. This project, I believe, is a $25 million project. Is it 25 million? The housing? What was the figure of the housing project initially? Is it 5 million or
I thought it
25
was around
million?
8 million.
Yeah.
8
About
million?
8. 8.
Yeah, okay. I didn't think it could be 25, no.
No.
Oh, yeah, there it is there. But, so that's for information, I guess, for this evening, but yes, CAO Johnson.
Well, Mr. Mayor, just on your point about the previous discussion we had with the board, I've had a number of discussions with Keith Harriman, who is now back with the group, as is David Butler, and he did agree with me that on 2 occasions, this is back last time we talked with the board a year and a half ago, at least. On 2 occasions, we were told quite clearly, you and I and the municipality, that they didn't need our money. Mr. Harriman, to his credit, agreed with that. One of the circumstances in that case there was the board, the president of the board, indicated to me in a telephone conversation that they had found other sources of funding. They didn't need us, and that was fine. The other issue that the reason why this has now come back, because your point that you were given to understand that they had found other sources of funding, and that's correct. They had a number of discussions with DSAB, and DSAB was going to guarantee the mortgage and finance some of the mortgage, but they were going to guarantee it. For a variety of reasons, that commitment has now been taken off the table. So DSAB is no longer willing or able to do that. So hence, excuse me, they've come back to us with what they asked us at least 2 years ago, which was to provide a limited guarantee of the mortgage. I don't know the pandemic and a number of other issues. The situation with CMHC and funding is very much in flux. There's been no application made to CMHC at the moment for funding, as far as I know. There's no indication at the moment from CMHC that funding will be available in the near future. So the board is doing its due diligence. They bought the property, which was our condition when we last left this a year and a half ago, was don't come back to talk to us until you bought that property. That's now been done. So they've come back to us, and they're trying to put all their conditions in order. And because DSAB is no longer willing to commit to the kind of funding they were before, they're not willing to guarantee the mortgage. CMHC, they assume, is going to ask for that mortgage guarantee. So that's why the letter was sent to us last week.
I see. Okay. So I take it there's going to be further correspondence from them then in this regard? Is that what we're waiting on?
Well, I'm not sure about that. I think perhaps it wasn't appropriate perhaps or available for them to appear to council tonight. But I would suggest that given the number of questions that have been raised here, that in terms of we don't know who the new governance body is, who those members are. There was some correspondence in the package that we included in terms of what that limited guarantee would mean, that it might be appropriate as a next step to invite some members of the board to come and talk to council and answer those questions, which we're not able to resolve tonight.
Okay. Is there any questions related to this from council at all? Okay. So yeah, we'll work towards inviting them for information purposes then.
Yeah.
Item 3, motion of support from East Ferris regarding Castleholm, and that's one that's quite well documented here in our package tonight. In that, there's a draft motion which is echoing the East Ferris letter that's in our package. Where is it here? The East Ferris letter in our package, and just so that everybody's aware, Councillor Kelly from East Ferris is a board member of Castleholm. Like he's a representative on the board. East Ferris is a larger share owner, I'll call it, than we are. Our representative, I believe, is Mayor Backer of Mattawa, because 4 municipalities share a representative in our case on a rotation. It used to be Mayor Jobin of Chisholm, and then it was Mayor Backer, now of Mattawa. East Ferris has their own direct representative on the board, so Mr. Kelly should be well aware of both sides of the table's discussion related to this, both as council and Castleholm itself, because he sits on that board. The virtual meeting that we held, we're invited to in early December, I want to say. I should have looked up the specific date. Had the chair of the board of Castleholm, which is Chris Main of the City of North Bay, and just for everybody's awareness, the City of North Bay directly controls half the board by membership, but they also, as you see in some of these financial scenarios, are about the 80% shareholder of the facility. So they carry a lot of weight in as far as the impact is going to hit them most. And they have, as a result of that, quite a lot of strength in the decision-making process of wherever this goes. Mayor McDonald and Deputy Mayor Vraybosch were part of that meeting, and neither of them, in the years leading up, they were steady inviting us to these information meetings, engaging our opinions on this redevelopment. And you will recall that so much of the conversation was dealt with the 4 municipalities to the east of us, our former partners, Mattawa, Matawan, Chisholm, or Calvin, and Papineau Cameron, wanting to get out of Castleholm and not be a member of it anymore. And to this day, they remain a member of it. They're still paying their levy, and their exit clause basically says that once this home is rehabilitated and renewed with a new facility, and they've paid their capital share of that, you're free to go, and you have no further obligation to Castleholme. So it's in their interest to have this construction project said and done. And as you see in the documentation, that won't be until 2026, even if they started construction today. But the costs have steadily risen. The construction costs of everything never go down. And the numbers keep rising annually on the construction of this long-term care home that we all own. The tender is out. The design drawings have been done now for a decade. They were revisited a year ago, and they paid, I think it was $300,000 just to have those documents reviewed, to bring them to a standard that is acceptable for a long-term care home in the year 2020. And adjustments were made to the drawings to suit any changes under the building code and so on. It's out to tender. They're expecting, based upon all of their consultants that they have a number in mind of what this facility should cost to build, but it is, like all construction, a complete unknown. I think they're hopeful that it will come in between $60 and $65 million to rebuild it. Certainly it'll blow the subject right out of the water if it comes in at, something astronomically higher than that. But they've engaged BDO, a specific side entity of BDO that's separate from the North Bay office, to be a construction financial overseer of all of this. Because like we know in our municipal corporation, if we were, building a mega project, our staff has their regular stuff to do. They can't be managing a mega construction project at the same time. Castleholme's very much the same. They have their financial people there, but they're not dedicated to this project. So they've engaged the services of a fellow from BDO to guide them through this process for the foreseeable future, and particularly the tendering and the financing of it. And he walked us through in this virtual meeting the fact that for the past 3 or 4 years, the direction that was given to the Castleholme board is, first of all, get all your paperwork in order, put that argument out about who's staying and who's leaving. All of that's been dealt with. They've put it out to tender, and now it's just wait and see what the number is when it comes in. The other parallel thing that should have been happening at the exact same time, and I believe is happening, is that Castleholme was directed 3 years ago, find financing for this based upon the new membership that's going forward, and tell us what our bill is. And the 4 townships to the east that are leaving, you get to pay your bill up front and you're gone. The rest of us that are staying, finance it over 25 or 30 years. Give us a pair of choices and we'll make up our minds as a group, whether it's 25 or 30 years. And BDO, in their letter, which is in our package there tonight, said that there's a variety of financing entities that are willing to lend money of that size, but probably the most cost-effective and most familiar with dealing with municipalities is Infrastructure Ontario. And that day in the conference call, the BDO accountant, is what he is, said, despite the fact you've dithered for a decade in building this thing, it's probably to your advantage because interest rates have never been as low as they are now. And you can lock in at a fantastic rate on a project this size for the next 25 years. So that was great news to all of us that have been at the table for the longest period of time. What was a bit surprising to me was that East Ferris, who has new representatives related to Castleholm because of council change there. And North Bay had new players at the table because it's of interest now to the mayor and the deputy mayor, who are the budget chiefs. This is hitting the fan for them because this is a substantial chunk of change that they've, it's all been talk up to now, but check writing time is just around the corner. So everybody's acutely aware now that this is getting serious. And they were starting to question the financing path. And just looking at East Ferris's letter that's in our package tonight, they passed a motion back in 2017 saying, and unfortunately they didn't copy the motion directly to us, but they spoke to it in their letter. So I can't see how far they're straying from the reality of their motion, but they're saying they wanted the Ministry of Health to finance their portion, which they have. The province has stepped up and contributed, I believe it's $62 million towards this project. The municipalities have to pay the other part, because at the end of the day, it's owned by the municipalities. It's not a provincial facility, but they still recognize the fact that long-term care is a provincial responsibility and are contributing to it on that basis. Secondly to that, East Ferris's motion said that the levy should have no bearing on the mortgage thing. And that's a bit different in that the levy is always there. This I recognize your question there in a moment. The Mattawa nursing home, when I was privy to that conversation, built by the Mattawa Hospital, it has a positive cash flow in that the cost to build the Mattawa nursing home, which used to be a private nursing home before it was acquired by the hospital, will pay for itself over a period of time because the profits of the annual operation pay the mortgage. In Castleholm's particular case, and the reason there's a levy every year to the municipalities is that it has a negative cash flow in that it runs at a deficit every year. They've made great strides to reduce that number, which irked all of us to no end for the longest time. And there was tremendous inefficiency, and they'll tell you as much even as soon as 3 and 5 years back. But there is no positive cash flow to pay down this mortgage. So the mortgage is going to be borne for the new construction by the owners, and the owners are us as municipalities. So East Ferris's long way of asking here, they also expressed other concerns in that, as I mentioned earlier, this debt, whatever our share is, shows on our books for that period of time under our financial information return and our ability to borrow for the next 25 or 30 years. And that's where it really irks the city of North Bay, because they're going to have, I think it's $38 million in their case sitting on their books for a long period of time under their debt repayment capacity. So in our case, it's substantially less, but it will still show in our books for the foreseeable future. Plus, it'll show not only as a bill every month for the levy that we currently already pay, but it'll show as a mortgage payment every month too. So I'm a bit at a loss of whether whether East Ferris is asking for, we don't want to know what the mortgage is, just roll it all into the levy and we'll pay a levy. That seems to be what their letter is saying to me. But in my personal opinion, I'd rather see the two separated, because as we know, the levy can creep up, and it's nice to have cost control awareness of what the levy is actually doing. The mortgage is a totally separate thing, and I'd like to see it stay that way. And then the third choice, I guess, in the whole conversation is whether the money gets borrowed by Castleholm on our behalf and we just get a monthly bill, or whether we go out, each of us as municipalities, and find our own financing and just write a great big check to Castleholm and say, here, build your project. So that's what's going on here. Yes, Councillor Baudouin.
So I'm just curious as to why Mayor Backer is, when does this term end? Because as far as I know, they have their own home. They're not even part of it anymore. And we're getting most of our information from East Ferris. So I'm curious as to why, I know that Chisholm, the Chisholm mayor was the one involved at one time, but now that he's no longer, now it's Dean, and Dean doesn't even form part of that group anymore. So what's up with that?
There's two sides to it. And going back 2 years ago, I was extremely frustrated with the fact that Chisholm's term had ended as being the representative on our behalf on Castleholm Board. As it turns out right now, I think every 24 years it gets to be your term, because these council terms are 4 years, and whoever's term, there's 6 municipalities represented on a rotation: Chisholm, us, Calvin, Papineau Cameron, Mattawa, and Matawan. So every 24 years it gets to be our turn to be the rep on the Castleholm Board. It was Chisholm's turn last time, and Leo filled the thing for 4 years. Neri had been the representative, I believe it was 8 years ago, or longer than that. It must have been 12 years ago. And because our turn hasn't been around in a while. The turn this time to have a representative on the Castleholm Board representing our group of 6 municipalities was Calvin's. And they declined to appoint a representative and instead handed it to Mayor Backer of Mattawa. And at an MBDC meeting, I raised that concern in that Mayor Backer had just finished serving a term on there through some other mechanism. And I said, you know, we need broader representation in that. But anyway, Calvin made the choice. They weren't going to use their right to appoint someone there. And Mattawa retained the representation. The other side of that is each of those 4 municipalities, despite all the conversation about them leaving, are still member municipalities of Castleholm, and they're not allowed to leave under provincial legislation until the new home is built and they've paid their construction costs. That's the only way they can get out of this. So they begrudge the fact that they're still members, but they are still members, and as a result, they're still our representative on the board.
So we need to go to Castleholm and tell them we want our own seat. There's no reason why he should be on there. Right?
There's a draft. There's a draft policy for the day they leave. The board composition changes, and we do get representation on there. I believe it's shared with Chisholm on a every second term basis, but it's no longer a 6-way thing. It's a 2-way thing, and it's based upon the percentage of ownership that we have in there. And if you look at the numbers, East Ferris has a direct representative because their ownership is substantially higher than us. And they maintain a single rep on there. North Bay will retain, I think, 4 from the 6 they have currently. They're trying to downsize the board a little bit. There's also provincial appointees on there, and I think there's 2 or 3 of them under the new model.
So we would need to amend the policy to take our own seat then, right?
Yes, in that it has been discussed, and it's contingent upon, first of all, the other 4 leaving, but they've come to general agreement that it was acceptable that based upon our percentage of ownership, we share with Chisholm is how it will work, if I recall correctly.
Yeah.
We'd have to ask for that policy, and the office there would provide it to us.
But we could
There's substantial conversation on that, though.
We could go in with East Ferris officially.
Well, they have a full vote already, so they wouldn't want to share with us, I wouldn't think.
Okay.
If they would, that'd
Well-
be fine, but
We need to talk more a little bit about this, maybe some other time, but I don't know that, I don't agree with that. They should still be on there and they're not even part of it anymore.
who, the other four?
Yeah.
Well, they're
like
still
this
part
could
of
be
it.
with
They
Chisholm.
don't like it, but they're still part of it. They're full members yet, the same as we are.
Hmm.
And they're still paying their levy, which is what irks them.
Are they? I thought they
Yeah.
were out, they had their own.
No, they have to pay their levy, plus they have to pay for the one in Mattawa, and I warned them of that 3 years ago, but if it takes 5 years for them to leave, they're gonna end up paying for 2 for a decade. But that's how it goes.
Okay. Okay.
So there is a motion in our package tonight, and it basically speaks to the East Ferris letter that we had. I don't think there's any urgency in adopting that if we choose to or not choose to. It's just there's some confusion there as with at East Ferris about what was discussed, and it was primarily the Bill Mayor Vraybosch before who led that conversation. And it was a different CAO too. Like there's been substantial change at East Ferris, and none of those people were in the room when general consensus was achieved 3 years ago. There's some disconnect there now about what their commitment was back then. But there's also a confusion coming from Castleholm in that I think this BDO consultant is giving us too many choices. We asked them to find us financing before and tell us, do you want to pay the full shot up front once we found the financing, or do you want to pay over 25 years? That's the only two choices that we should have. And it seems that they've confused things by giving us too many options. And I think it's not our place to go out shopping for loans on a project that size. We directed them to do it on our behalf. It's their job. It's their domain to finance their project and tell us that they've found us the best financing out there. In my opinion, that's how it should be, and that's what they were told to do 3 years ago. Is there any other conversation at the CAO clerks meeting? Has this been discussed at all or anything? You're muted.
Pretty much on the basis that you just talked about tonight, Your Worship.
Okay. So it's as confusing as hell and
Yes,
big numbers.
yes, you hit the
I
nail on the head. I didn't want to say that. But yes,
Okay.
it's on our agenda for next Thursday as well.
Is it?
Yep.
Okay. So is there anybody tonight that wants to vote on this subject at all, or are we okay with referring this to the next meeting? I'm seeing a general agreement with postponing doing something. Okay. All right. So we'll set that aside for tonight then. The next one, hope, is a bit more straightforward. It's a report from the Public Works Manager related to a cashless system for the landfill site. And there's a report in our package related to it. Would you like to speak to it for a moment, Manager Carr? You know all the ins and outs of it.
Because of COVID, we had to deal with a lot of changes in the landfill, particularly. Obviously, we're dealing with people's garbage, and it was hard to keep social distancing. It was hard to charge our taxpayers. It was hard to collect monies for tipping fees. So I found that at the landfill, we consumed a lot of material in our landfill. After speaking about this, we tried to think of ways how we could collect our tipping fees without touching any cash or ensuring the safety of our residents. So I was able to speak to some of our peers out there, and they have a touchless system. And the reason they have that is because they have a shared landfill site with 3 other townships. So they use just like a debit machine at the main office. and we would have card systems that would be loaded like a Tim Hortons gift card. Instead of like 10 coffees being allowed on there, it'd be the allotment of their garbage bags. So when they come to the landfill, they would just put their card over top of the machine and tap it just like any other Tim Hortons or gift card system. And it would allow us to track all their garbage bags. So then we would begin retracking all the garbage that's put into the landfill, and it would go into a portal so that we would be able to pull any records from that portal for any costs, post-closure costs. And it would be it would be a lot more correct in getting the data right, because right now we're punching bags, and then at the end of the year you count all the cards and see how many bags are left. Also, if there's tipping fees involved, they would just use their debit card and they'd be able to pay for their tipping fees right at the landfill on the machine. To set up the system is $4,149. We do have the modernization fund that we haven't really tapped into with discussion with the CAO and our finances. That would be a one-time cost. And currently with the landfill operating budget, we spend $900 a year in tipping the cards that are made up for your garbage count. And plus it takes Andre like 2 weeks to get them cut and processed and labeled. And then if a homeowner moves, we have to get another card, etc. So as soon as a homeowner would leave their building and we change our 911 system, the card can be done in the system, the card is cut off, and then a new card is issued to the next homeowner. Every year, that same card would just be renewed through a computer system to put back on the right amount of bags for their disposal every single year. So once again, we're not doing the cards, etc. That is also your access to the landfill. So to maintain that system is approximately $900. I'm not sure if many people have worked with POS systems here with council, but there is usually a small fee for debit processing or Visa, MasterCard processing. And it's hard to, we don't often take any payment through credit card for the landfill. So it would be a minimal charge for the debit. I think we could maintain like around $1,200. So our increase would be very minimal in our budget to maintain that system. It'd be touchless. The money goes directly into the bank. In the past, we've had some problems with people paying their bills on time. So I hope that would eliminate that as well. And it's touchless. So it helps us promote the not spreading COVID and making our residents feel more comfortable with using the landfill site. And that's my little presentation.
Okay, just to add to that, under the current circumstances and looking at that financial report that is provided in our agenda tonight too, the greatest loss of revenue this year due to COVID was the absence of the tipping fees coming in. So probably if we'd have had this system in place, that wouldn't have happened, and it would have paid for itself in all likelihood in this one occasion. Does that sound right?
I totally agree, and it's very true. We did lose a lot of revenue at the landfill. However, it did maintain the service that we were required to give to our people, but it didn't cover it. So we did have a loss in revenue. I think it would be a great benefit. Like, we don't know how long COVID's going to be here. It seems to be getting worse instead of better. And this would ensure that we're able to maintain those revenues within the landfill.
Okay. Any questions? I haven't even called the motion yet, but based on that report, is there any questions on the system at all? Okay, so there's a motion in our package. I take a mover and a seconder for to table that conversation. Moved by Councillor Foisey and seconded by Councillor Baudouin. Whereas the Public Works Manager has investigated the cost of a touchless landfill pass system for the landfill site at 185 Blue Sea Road due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And whereas the Public Works Manager is satisfied that the Moneris touchless system has the functions and capabilities to accommodate our needs. And whereas the startup fee for the Moneris system is $4,149. And whereas the Public Works Manager is recommending the purchase of the Moneris touchless system at a startup cost of $4,149. Be it hereby resolved that council approves this recommendation, and further that the cost be charged to the modernization fund. Any questions on this one at all? All in favor? Carried. Any indication, Anne, of how long it'll take to implement?
I've had to have further conversation, but in my past experience working with POS systems, it is very seamless, and it probably would be up and running in the next month.
Okay. Moving to the information part of our agenda, Castle Home redevelopment. Yes, there was a question yet?
Can I be excused for 2 minutes?
Sure.
Thank you.
Does everybody need a break for 2 minutes? We could do that. Okay. So I'll just hold off the Castle Home redevelopment report. We beat that one to death already. And when Councillor Baudouin returns, we'll move to the memo from the Director of Planning. Okay, we're ready to head out again. The memo from the Director of Planning related to the Committee of Adjustment and the ATV. I think the Committee of Adjustment portion of it was, for my awareness, related to that meeting we had earlier this evening in how Committee of Adjustment should work. And then the ATV bylaw note was related to our conversation about speed limits that we left in amending the bylaw last meeting. And fortunately for us, or unfortunately, as the case may be, the province on the 1st of January did our work for us. We had only beat them by a couple of weeks by amending our bylaw. They've since permitted all of those types of ATVs that we dealt with in that bylaw provincially by provincial mandate under the Highway Traffic Act. And also they have dealt with the speed limit provisions in that if it's a 50-kilometer-an-hour speed limit that's posted, ATVs are allowed to do 20. And if it's higher than 50, they're allowed to do 50. Like if it's 80, they're allowed to do 50 and so forth. So it's all in the Highway Traffic Act now. But further in the agenda, there's also a bylaw from Bancroft that Councillor Foisey has submitted that we can discuss at that point, if that's all right. Okay, and the impact assessment change summary is generally an overview of how our assessments have changed incrementally over the past year. The Impact Municipal Partnership Report is there, and the Ontario Gazette looks to be on the way out in its current format, because the longest they wanted us to renew our subscription is 2 months. And the letter that they've submitted is kind of onerous in the fact that, ominous, I guess, in the fact that it seems substantial change is coming to the Ontario Gazette. Item 6 is a memo from the CAO regarding the financial health of the township. Back in our budget meeting, there was some concern expressed related to the line items and whether we would be adequately funded under the budget that was tabled. And it turns out that it would appear to be almost $1 million surplus left at the end of the year's operations, because most of the line items didn't expend their full allocation. Is there any other conversation related to that financial report? I trust everybody's had a look at it. Okay, the next one then is the memo from the CAO related to organizational review, and it's pretty self-explanatory in its own regard. We've got a number of staff who are on the doorstep of retirement. They just haven't walked through the door yet. So it's a conversation and a process that needs to be engaged as far as if we lose key members of our staff to retirement, where do we go from here? Is there anything further, CAO Johnston, that you'd like to add to your memo that you've submitted?
Well, just I've said it all in my memo, Your Worship, but for council, this is maybe my top priority at the moment, because as I mentioned in the memo you just alluded to, we've got perhaps 2 senior members of staff that may be leaving this year. I'm leaving within the next 12 to 14 months. And that would be in an organization our size, that would be a very severe circumstance. I talked to this group 2 years ago at the recommendation of Dean DeCare. They're very experienced in this kind of organizational review. And just so council understands that if we proceed with this 6-week organizational review, I will bring that to council for their review and approval. And following that, the second phase of that is to provide recommendations on succession planning. We can't do that until we do an organizational review, find out where things are sitting at the moment, what changes need to be made if necessary to job descriptions, and then look at succession planning. There's not a lot of room here to do otherwise. I like this firm. We've signed no contract with them yet. I told them that I would provide the proposal to you, and I would like to go ahead and have them do the organizational review. It's a very reasonable cost, and then when that report is done in 6 weeks' time, starting in the first week in February, I will bring that to council, and we can have a discussion about that, see what you think. And then once that's been approved, the organizational review, we would move on to succession planning. So that's what I'd like to do.
Okay. There's no motion in our package tonight to adopt this. Is this something you're looking for a motion of council tonight in regards to?
Not really, sir. As I said, I explained to Hallie, the leader of the group, that we would talk about it tonight. And if there was any discussion about the terms of reference, we could adjust that. But I would like to give them the go ahead to do the organizational review. It's not a big project. It can be done in 6 weeks. Very, very reasonable cost. They know what they're doing. And then I'll bring that report back to council sometime in early March, where we can talk about any organizational review changes that need to be made, and then move on to phase 2, which will be to come up with a succession planning strategy.
Okay. Is there any questions from any members of council related to the memo or the engagement of BDO to do the organizational review? Okay, I know, yes, Councillor Viancore?
Just a comment. I agree with it. I think it's a good plan. So do we want
Thank
to
you.
just, do we want to do this tonight or?
I just, unless there's any objection, Councilor, I would just like council concurrence that I can give them the go ahead. We'll do the organizational review, which, as I said, will start in February for 6 weeks. And then I'll bring that report back to council for your review and consideration.
Okay.
Thank you.
I can write a quick motion here as far as that goes, that the CAO be authorized to engage BDO to do an organizational review
Per the terms of reference that was provided to council tonight.
per the supplied terms of reference.
That's good. Thank you.
Is there a mover for that motion? Is that a question, Councillor Legacy, or a moving? It's a move, okay. And is there a seconder for the motion, Councillor Viancore? I'll read it again just for clarity. Motion moved by Councillor Legacy, seconded by Councillor Viancore, that the CAO be authorized to engage BDO as per the terms of reference to do an organizational review. Any other questions or comments at all? All in favor? Carry.
Thank you, council. Thank you.
Okay, memo from Ed Veldboom. This bit of a misnomer. It's not related to the snow removal conversation we had prior to Christmas. This is more, I think, a request from the Public Works Department related to depositing snow on roadways. This seems to be the reply that he's giving there. And it would seem that his advice is to let the Highway Traffic Act be the policy, which has greater clarity and enforcement capability than any policy we draft, it would seem, based on what he wrote here. Is that how you understood it, Anne?
Yes, the bylaw did go to council for a first and second reading. By the third reading, we did have confirmation from Mr. Veldboom with that notice to Doug, that it would be probably easier if the OPP were to jurisdict the HTA with when it comes to that. Last week, however, between Andrew and I, we did draft a letter. It went to the CAO that will be given to our snow plow violators, I guess we'd like to call them. Just reiterating the Highway Traffic Act, that you're not to cross plow, and that it's a waste of our resources as well as our money, as we're putting sand on the road and then someone comes and cross plows across the road and removes the sand, which also makes them legal for their actions if an incident should occur where they are cross plowing. So those letters have been drafted up. I signed them, and if Andrew or I are out and about and we see that, we just quietly drop it into their mailbox and take note that we have given them that notice.
Okay, so I guess the other part that you just reminded us of is that we have tabled a first and second reading of bylaw policy on this. I guess the direction that needs to go then to the bylaw creating department, which is usually Mr. LaPlante, is that our bylaw needs to speak to the Highway Traffic Act being the deferral policy that it boils back to. Is that how it's going to flow?
No, once council does a first and second reading, and then it was under still like a review through Mr. Velboom, our solicitor, and he's advising that the bylaw not be put through with a third reading.
I see. Okay. So procedurally, how does a bylaw, where do they go to die, CAO Johnston? You just don't do the third reading and that's the end of it, or do we need to discharge it somehow? You're quite quiet right now under mute.
I'm not used to this. If it's not given a third reading, it dies on the books.
I see. Okay. So then, item 9, correspondence provided by Councillor Foisey, Bancroft off-road bylaw, and we talked about that a bit, but it's your discussion point. I'll let you lead the discussion.
Yeah, I thought it would be nice to include the speed limits. I wasn't aware that I initiated wanted to initiate a change in the speed limits. I knew from a few years back that we had included the speed limits for off-road vehicles in the newsletter. And I like the way that Bancroft did their bylaw, and I was wondering if we can do something similar. That's all. Including the speed limits, so we know, like I didn't remember it was 20 kilometers per hour. Like I have an ATV and I go about there. So it's just nice to know what are the speed limits for off-road vehicles.
Okay, and as I was refreshing my memory on this subject today, I was reminded that the Highway Traffic Act, as I described earlier, if it's 50 or less, it's 20 for ATVs, and if it's 80 and higher, it's 50 for ATVs. So Bancroft must have had a crystal ball because they in their bylaw, they exactly copied what the province adopted on the 1st of January. So either way, that is the current provincial legislation related to speeds. Are they satisfactory to you, or would you?
Yeah. I just would like it to be included in the bylaw. So if somebody looks up the bylaw, they can see that. I know there's a lot of many more things from the Highway Traffic Act, but that would be nice to include in our bylaw also.
Okay. The only thing is, if Mr. Velboom, for example, just suggested to us not to have policy regarding snow on the roads because the Highway Traffic Act is always stronger, he probably would give the same advice. I mean, we're following the Highway Traffic Act, but yeah.
It is exactly from the Highway Traffic Act. I just was wondering if it could be included in our bylaw. Copy exactly what's from the Highway Traffic Act and include it in there for the speed limits. Because if you ask people what's the speed limits for off-road vehicles, well, probably don't know.
Yeah, I think the whole point of the provincial legislation that happened on the 1st of January that I wasn't aware it was happening makes our bylaw a moot point anyway, because the bylaw is irrelevant. The whole province is under that policy now. So what we can do, though, is in our next flyer, we can put those speed limit notices in there so that people are aware, at least locally, what provincial policy is.
That would be nice. Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Yes, CAO Johnson.
Your worship, and for Councillor Foisey, no, Bancroft didn't have a crystal ball. Those points were in the Highway Traffic Act before January 1st. What January 1st did was it enshrined it that municipalities don't need to do that. Those if they want to, that's fine, but there's no value added to do that. I like the idea about a newsletter because if we put those limits in our municipal bylaw, there is some requirement or pressure on the municipality to enforce that, and I'd rather not we do that. I'd rather that be left to the OPP. I agree with Councillor Foisey that people may not know what those limits are, but if we post it on our website, if we put it in our newsletter, I think that's a better way than adding it to the bylaw.
Sure, I agree. As long as it's somewhere that people
Sure, yeah,
have a look at it. But like I
I
say,
agree.
I have an ATV and I didn't know it was 20. I
Yeah.
go about 30 there, but because I have chains there. Okay,
Okay,
That's
and then the next discussion point is Bancroft bylaw enforcement.
yeah, it'd be nice if we can have that too. Like it seems like we're not we're not the best at enforcing the bylaws. Like, it's just my opinion there. I don't know.
So if we could have what, this type of a letter to go out?
Yeah, like if you would attract people, like I don't know, like if I don't know, if is the word out that we do enforce the bylaws or we don't. I think we're improving, but that's all I have.
Is this from their website or was this something
Yeah.
they mailed out to people?
No, that's from their
it's
website.
it's a bylaw, Your Worship.
Yeah.
Oh,
And if I may, I have a problem with that. I understand what Councillor Foisey is saying, and I agree. But to me, there's no value added. Look, if our bylaw enforcement officer or any municipal bylaw enforcement officer in any municipality is not doing his job, at the end of the day, we don't need to show them a bylaw. We show them the door. Okay. A bylaw enforcement officer knows what his duties is or should. And if they're not being adhered to, then we take some action. But I see no value added in passing a bylaw, which again reiterates what the job description and his job function already is.
No, that's not passing
we
a
need to
bylaw,
we need to do a better job of that, Councillor Foisey. I agree,
Yeah.
but I see no
Yeah, I
value
know we're-
added in putting it in the bylaw.
We are improving, but slowly.
Well, no, but a
But
bylaw's
we
not
are
going to change
improving,
that, sir.
hopefully.
A bylaw, sir, is not going to change that. I'm saying that I agree with you totally.
Yeah.
But we don't need to put it in a bylaw.
No. This is not a bylaw, it's just
Well,
okay,
theirs was.
information.
okay. Next one, same discussion point, winter newsletter.
Yeah, is this from the emergency control group or is this from council?
No, this newsletter was the annual Christmas newsletter that went out from the municipality.
Okay, well, usually we're asked if we want to send our greetings also. That's one difference I noticed. I know last year I didn't, I was invited to put some writing in for saying Merry Christmas and that's a little change.
The recording secretary, who was the editor, wants to make a comment.
Councillor Foisey, I will take the blame on this one.
No
With
problem.
taxes being due the same week, I was on a very tight deadline. And I just put that together as fast as I could to get it out. But I promise this year, I will make sure you get your statement in there.
And I shouldn't push the issue because last year I was invited to put something in there and I didn't, so.
Okay,
Okay,
and
there was-
moving then to noise complaint 2019.
Yeah, okay, we can do that. The individual here is still waiting for a reply. That's all I have to say. Did not get
Okay.
a reply.
Okay, so we'll leave that for tonight then.
So was wondering if I would get a reply,
Okay,
no matter what is said, it's just,
all right. Unfinished business. A memo from the CAO regarding next steps of the community safety and well-being plan. There's a memo in our package related to that. You'll recall in December, we engaged a consultant to help us do these plans. which are far more complex than I ever envisioned when they were first mentioned at a police service board conference about 3 years ago. But there needs to be an advisory committee created from members of the community and members of council and staff and so forth. And in a nutshell, what you're being asked to contemplate this evening is that the first 3 members that get added to the advisory committee, which is a how many member committee, CAO Johnston?
There is no limit
Oh,
on the number, Your Worship. The legislation and talking to the ministry and talking to the consultant who's done a lot of these, is that the advisory committee, if the plan is going to be of any value to the community, which is what we want, it needs to be as diverse as possible. So in addition to some members of council, they want various sectors in the community involved, clergy, seniors. So my request tonight to council is to we don't want to name names here in a public meeting, but for council members to give some thought as to who might be on that advisory committee, and we can enshrine that perhaps at our next meeting. As you pointed out, Your Worship, this is a very, very complicated procedure. A lot of the municipalities in Nipissing have been struggling with this for 2 years. It's very complicated. And the consultant that we're using, Gary Fay, was recommended to us by Staff Sergeant Bill, because he's done a lot of these, and he really knows what he's doing. And he's been a great deal of help to me and Doug at the moment. So what we need at the moment is that the next step, you passed a resolution making a commitment for council on behalf of the community that we're going to enshrine policies that provide safety and well-being measures for our community going ahead in the future. We've done that. That's required under law. The next item is to appoint an advisory committee. That advisory committee then will start setting up some stakeholder groups and sending out surveys and so on. And we have some ideas as to how we could do that. But we need some names from council as to who might sit on this committee. There's no the more the better. If we want to make this as diverse and as representative of our community as possible, we want to have as many members on the committee as possible. Members of the Algonquin First Nation, seniors, clergy, members of council. So there's no limit on that. And the other suggestion I made in my memo to everyone is that the consultant and Staff Sergeant McMullen also said that what a number of municipalities are doing is making the advisory committee a subcommittee of their police services board. And the reason for that is that we need some structure that immediately provides that. It's not that the police services board would control that committee, but we would have members from the police services board on the committee, because half or a good deal of what the plan deals with is safety. So a lot of the data that we need to develop the plan, a lot of the personnel we need to talk to are OPP and agencies involved with the OPP. So that made a lot of sense to me. As I said, it's not that we would be subjugating making the advisory committee subservient to the police services board. It would not be that at all. But we'd have members of the police services board on the advisory committee. It would be a subcommittee, so that there's some structure to it. A lot of municipalities, East Ferris, for example, is doing that. And I like that idea because it immediately gets some personnel on it that are going to be very helpful to us in developing the plan. So that was something I wanted to mention to council tonight to consider when we set this committee up.
Okay, so you're not looking for any decision on it tonight specifically then?
No, sir. Just for council members to send you or I some ideas about members that might be on the committee. And perhaps at our next meeting of council, we can talk about that. The one item that was in my memo last month, which I need to correct, is that Mr. Fay was under the impression that the extension that was made to the plan, which originally was January 1st of this year, has been extended. He thought it had been extended to January of 2022. It has not. At the moment, it's the end of July 2021. And I rather suspect, given the dire circumstances that we're moving into with the pandemic, that will be moved again. But at the moment, we're looking at 6 months to develop this plan. So we need to move on this precipitately.
Okay, there was two questions. First of all, from Councillor Foisey and then Councillor Legacy.
Okay.
Yeah, page 6 of 12. It says the mayor and the CEO need to be committed in providing ways under leadership governance. Shouldn't that be council? The whole of council?
I'm sorry, what's the question, sir?
Page 6 of 12,
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
governance leadership. Why it's just the mayor and the CEO? Should it be the whole of council that need to be committed?
No, that's not what it says. And I pointed that out in my memo. The legislation says that the governance committee should be led by the mayor and CAO. Doesn't say that's it. So other members of council can be added to that group.
This is Mr. Fay's three-legged stool
Yeah,
overview that he has in there, and it
Right.
does say that.
yes.
But
But as I pointed out, and I talked to Gary about this, the legislation says that there needs to be a governance committee, and it should be the mayor and the CAO of the municipality. But that's not the sole membership on that committee. It can be other members of council or other members, period, that council determines should be there.
Okay, so as a committee, you report back to council, though?
No,
No?
reports to the governance committee. That's why it's called the governance committee.
Okay,
and you're
so,
suggesting that the Police Services Board
no,
be
no.
the parent and form a subcommittee for to have, as we know, any municipal committee has to have some structure as far as their record keeping and their time of the meeting and notification and all that. This is going to be structured that way as well, I take it?
Yes, and Councillor Foisey, let me be clear.
Mhm.
At the end of the day, when this plan is developed, it's council's plan, it's the municipality's plan, so it will ultimately be submitted and approved along the way by council. It's just that the legislation sets up various processes within development of the plan, and one of them is this governance committee, and the legislation says it shall be led by the mayor and the CAO. But that's not the full membership on that committee.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Legacy, you had a question?
Had two, but Mayor McLaren, you answered one, and that was regarding the mandate. And my second question is, how often do you propose that this committee would be meeting?
The advisory committee, Councillor? Well, given the shortened time frame that we're looking at the moment, I would say on a fairly regular basis. There's a lot of work to be done. Now, a lot of that, pardon?
How often is regular basis, do you figure?
Maybe twice a month.
Okay.
And a lot of the background work, when I'm talking to my colleagues at our CAO clerks meetings, a lot of the background work that needs to be done, and there's a lot of it needs to be done, can be done by staff. And we need to do surveys. I'm going to send out later this week a toolkit to all members of council, which will show you the kind of surveys we're going to use to get stakeholder input, the kind of assessment forms we're going to use. But staff can do that and then bring that material to the advisory committee. And I would say at the moment, probably they would meet perhaps twice a month.
Thank you.
That's an important question when we're approaching or soliciting people to participate in this, they're gonna
Yes.
say, well, how much of my time is this gonna take? So,
Exactly.
That's,
A lot of it, as I say, not to take anything away from the advisory committee, Councilor Lagasse, but a lot of the background work will be done by staff. I know my CAO colleagues in Nipissing, they tell me that their colleagues, their staff are doing a lot of work on that. And that's where it has to be. We talked about, for example, our climate change specialist, Hassan, has proven himself to be an excellent ambassador to go out and talk to stakeholders. He's broadened his contacts in Nipissing. He's spoken to a number of groups about climate change and also about other issues. So we have some good people on board that can provide that information. And as I said, one of the reasons for using OPP personnel is that a lot of the data we need to do on the safety end of it is OPP data. So we would get that using staff and then bring that to the committee where the representatives sit, and that would probably be at the moment for twice a month. If that timeline is extended, we might be able to get by with less than that. If it's not, then it certainly will be twice a month in the beginning, maybe more than that as we get towards the end of that 6-month period.
yes,
So it's a 10-month period for this committee?
At the moment, Councillor, it's 6 months. 7. End of July.
okay, so that, it's information at this point in time, but you are sending out a,
I'm going to send out a toolkit, Your Worship,
Toolkit.
which will show members of council the kinds of documents that we're going to use to contact stakeholders, get data to put into the plan. I'll send that all out to everyone sometime this week.
okay,
And that so maybe a good segue. I mentioned this to you. My plan is that unless something happens, my plan is that I'm going to resume my weekly heads up reports starting this Friday. So I'll probably provide those toolkits and so on to everyone on Friday.
okay, thank you. Unfinished business, the memo from the CAO regarding the consolidated procedural bylaw has been mooted by the fact that we've passed first and second reading of that very procedural bylaw earlier this evening. So now this memo that's in your package, does it add
Redundant.
anything to that conversation?
No, sir.
No, okay. It was just speaking to the fact that the only change to the procedural bylaw has been the electronic meeting capability that we're currently functioning on.
Yeah, and I just wanted, I meant to do this earlier. I just wanted to mention to Councillor Foisey, Councillor, you asked me at our meeting last month that when I provided the consolidated bylaw, that we provide council members with the bylaw that is replacing with what sections have been removed. I didn't do that because in the cases where we remove sections, that kind of secondary bylaw is appropriate. But in this case here, we're not removing anything. We just added one section. So I didn't do that. That's why.
Yeah, I thought it would be more extensive, so.
Okay.
Okay, so it looks like we've come to the point in our meeting of confirmatory bylaw. I would take a mover and a seconder for it. Moved by Councillor Lagasse, seconded by Councillor Vinecore. Whereas council deems it expedient to pass 3 readings of the following bylaw at this session, be it hereby resolved that a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council from December 8th, 2020 to January 12th, 2021 be read a first, second, and third time, passed and numbered 2021-1, and that the said bylaw be signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed with the seal of the corporation, and be engrossed in the bylaw book. Any questions? All in favor? Carried. It looks like we've completed our mission for the evening. I'd take a mover and a seconder to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Councillor Vinecore, seconded by Councillor Foisey, that this meeting be adjourned at 9:10 PM. All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks, Andre.
Nate.
Thank you for the good meeting. Thank you, Andre.
Night, everyone.